Hey now, Pete from PFG Pedals here. Today I am going to show you how to assemble one of my FF1 Fuzz Face kits with the vintage style phenolic PCB. This is, by no means an exhaustive kit. This is just meant to be an easy way to get the correct vintage parts, for somebody who's already experienced with building pedals. And this is great for upgrading like the Dunlop JDF2 germanium fuzz face, for instance, which is not really true to the original. Sounds great. It's a great pedal on its own, but it's not really the vintage style fuzz face thing. It's got much higher gain transistors, many more bells and whistles added in the circuit. So a lot of people like to change them to vintage, and that's why I provide this kit. My kit comes with the 4 carbon comp resistors, and actually my newest kits, instead of this is a quarter watt 8.2K. My newest kits come with a 10K bias resistor trimmer that fits in the same spot. Or if you really insist on having fixed resistors, I also have full-size half-watt resistors for it. This is just using up some of my old parts that I wouldn't sell anymore. And I've also taken the time to skin the capacitors. Now, basically, the plastic coating on the capacitors is just, to hold the labeling and stuff. You can take it right off. Looks quite cool. Doesn't hurt anything. Leave it on. Take it off. Do what you want. Just if you are going to take them off, just test the capacitor after you take it off. Make sure you didn't mess it up. It's a bummer to like put in a component, build a board and then find out you didn't test one of the components. All of these components have already been tested when I pack the kits. I test each component in a, component analyzer so that I know they're right within spec. So I suggest you do that too. Just because they come brand new out of a package does not mean they are what they say they are. You always have to check. So to know which cap is which of these two electrolytics, I marked the 1.0 UF input cap with a blue dot and this 22 UF cap with a black dot. Same as I do the transistors, I've marked the slightly lower gain BC108B with blue for Q1 and black for Q2. As far as tools goes, you will need some flush cutters, a soldering iron, of course, solder. Helpful stuff would be stuff like solder braid and desoldering pump in case you mess up. And in the event that you haven't soldered before, please go, look at some tutorials, practice, get some, you can buy practice boards on Amazon. They come with a bunch of parts and you can sit there and practice soldering and desoldering on something that's worthless. It doesn't do anything. And then you don't have to worry about wrecking your nice new kit. So let's begin. We're just going to go bottom to top right on up. So first up is the 1.0 UF electrolytic capacitor. This is the same size capacitor seen in the Sun Face. The original Fuzz Face used a 2.2 or maybe even a 2.5 UF. So the tone benders use like 5 and 10 UFs. Now, the bigger capacitor lets through a lot more bass. But, I mean, at this level, we're talking about, sub-audible bass to some extent. So it creates the woolliness and woofiness that some people like in a fuzz. But, for a more moderate, modern sounding fuzz, I like to reduce the capacitor even more than this. I typically go with like as small as a 0.047, like a 47 nanofarad versus a 1.0 UF, which is 1000 farads. So many times larger. And now, the important thing with capacitors is the polarity. I am building this for silicon, not silicone. Silicone goes in breast implants and in window caulking. Silicon goes in chips. So if you notice on the back where the capacitors go, there is a plus and minus. This is set up for positive ground for PNP germanium transistors or PNP whatever type of transistors. But since I'm doing silicone, these are all just opposites. So my negatives go to the positive and my positives go to the negative. If that's too confusing for you, this project's probably beyond your capabilities. And the same thing will hold true for the power. If you're using a positive ground germanium transistors, then you will use the black lead from the battery will be your 9-volt line, and the red lead will be your common negative earth, ground, whatever you want to call it. So first we've got the 1UF cap with a dot. Now, if I were you, I'd be testing this right now, but in the interest of keeping this somewhat brief, because I tend to ramble, I did all the testing before I turned the camera on like a good boy. And what I'm going to do is eye this up and then try to get the leads bent just right so that it sits nice and centered in between the two holes. So that's where the tweezers come in. There are devices, forming devices for this, but I just do it by hand. It's just, there's no reason. And don't make a kinked bend. Make a nice radius to it. You don't want a sharp bend because that fatigues the metal and it can be a possible failure point down the line. Especially if you have to bend it over and over, if you have to adjust it a few times and you made a very tight kink, like hard 90 there, the leg might break right off. So since like we talked about that polarity thing, I am doing negative ground. So on most electrolytic capacitors, you obviously check this before you take the film off. The positive side is the side with the dimple in it, with that line around it. So my negative side is the fat end, the plain end. So that negative side is going to go towards the input source in this case. Generally, rule of thumb is when you have negative ground, the positive side of the capacitor goes closer to the transistor. If you have positive ground, the negative side goes closer to the transistor. I'm sure there's times where that doesn't apply, but 99.9% of times, especially in fuzz pedals, that's going to be the rule. Now here, you can do two things. You can center it. The hole for this is back here because they allowed for a much larger capacitor if necessary. But I like keeping them in line. So what I do is I line them up so that there'll be a longer lead at the back. So I'll take the front here, bend it right about there, get it started. And if you notice, I advanced the tweezers down to get that rounder bend rather than just holding them in one spot. And then I put it in the hole. Then I kind of grab the tweezers where I think I need to bend it at, a little bit ahead of where I want to go. Boom. And then pull it out and do that bend. Now, these don't have to be perfect. They have to be as perfect as you want them to be, though. So if you want to take all day making these beautiful, then by all means, you do it. Sometimes you can kind of straighten these out a little bit. But now, yes, see the caps, they line up pretty good. They're a little different size, but they're fairly centered on each other. I'm pretty happy with that. I don't like how this leg, I went a little short on that. So what I will do is take a pair of needle nose pliers or any pliers where the teeth meet flush. If there's a gap in there, they're not going to be any good for that. And then I'll just carefully use them to straighten the lead out very delicately. And then I will try again. And I'll do this 2 or 3 times if I have to, very carefully. Because this is where you can get into trouble with breaking leads because you kept bending it over and over again and suddenly it snaps off in your hand. But there it goes, nice and fits in there. And that's when you got a good fit, when it slides right in. If there's any resistance, then it means you've got the wires a little too far apart or too close together, especially if you're getting towards the end. If you have to force it, you shouldn't have to force that part into place, especially with the carbon comp resistors. They will crack, they will break, and you will be sad. So next up, we've got I'm going to do the output gap. Actually, I'll just keep going up. We'll keep on going up. So my next one will be the 33K resistor. Now this has 3 orange bands, orange representing the number 3. So you have 3, 3, and then the first 2 are the numbers. So orange is 3, 3, and then an orange is 3 zeros. So 333 zeros. No, I'm kidding. 33K. I'm not going to sit here and teach you all how to do transistor codes. Just you know, once you use the code checkers online a couple times, you figure the code out. And like before, I'm going to bend these leads. I got to remember to do this in camera. I don't normally do this on camera, so I keep bringing it to where I normally do it at, closer to my chest, because this is not the easiest to hold my hands without knocking this phone over. Do that there, get them started, boom, looks pretty good. And these old resistors have big fat leads, so these are a little tough to get in there, but you got to make sure, just look at it, you can tell if it looks like the lead is having to, like, you know, dance out or, you know, too far in, and you've got to push really hard, then you need to rebend the lead. Alrighty. Now, normally on a typical build, the next would be the 330 ohm for silicon or 470 ohm for germanium. However, I'm a fancy pants kind of guy, and I like volume when I use my pedals. So I put the 8.2K next. By swapping around the position of the 8.2K and the 330 or 470 ohm resistor, you will keep the bias the same, but you will more than double the output volume, meaning you won't have to turn the volume all the way up and then wish you had a little more, as is the case with most fuzz faces. So here, again, I'm just going to center it. Now, normally this will be the same size resistor. I'm just doing this because I want to use up these parts. Otherwise, it'll just be sitting in a bag forever. And then I'll sell this at a discount. Again, I'm bending it. Not on camera, but not that it, like, you need to see this. I mean, it's pretty obvious what I'm doing, right? Like, you bend the lead and make it fit. And even here, I line up the resistors so that the colored bands are all red from left to right. So you got your 8 is gray, red is 2, and then 2 zeros, so 8200. Orange is 3, so 3, 3, and then the third line is the zeros, 3 zeros, 33000, 33,000, 33K. Next up will be the 330 ohm resistor. Now you've got the 2 orange stripes, again 3, 3, and then a third brown line, which represents 1 0. So 330. This one, you gotta watch out for. This can be a little stinker if you're not paying attention. There are 2 holes right next to each other. One is for the capacitor, one is for this. They're actually connected, but if you're not paying attention, it's easy to put the resistor through the wrong hole, and that you'll realize when you go to put the transistor in that, oops, I took the wrong hole. Wrong hole, fool. Anybody remember that movie? Again, forgetting to do it on camera. This is going to be like the worst video ever. That's okay. I'm used to it. It'll be slightly worse than my last worst video ever. Yeah, this is another tight one. These old Allen Bradley resistors have thick leads that just don't have on the new ones. So like the ones from Stackpole have like little dainty girl leads on them. All right. before we get too far ahead, let's get to 100K in there. Now, for 100K, we've got a brown, which is 1. Black is 0, so 1, 0. And then yellow, which is 4. So 4 zeros behind that. So 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. 100,000, 100K. For whatever reason, this gap is a little longer. I think in the early days, they used maybe a 1 watt. There's Erie resistors in there, so they're a little bigger, so they left more space for it. Probably just because it was the parts they had on hand. But just make sure you don't bend them all the same length and then realize, oh, that one's a little longer. That's why I don't pre-bend them. Boom. Slipped in there nicely. Looking nice. That's how they should slide in. The Allen Bradley ones, actually, I think that's a different company. It's got a little thinner leads on it. Still, it's old, but I think it might be Bourne's or something like that. Now, here is the output cap. Now, here, again, you've got these offset holes, so you can line it up center with everything if you want. I centered in the holes. It's just how I do it for this one. I just like it offset because it's a different stage, kind of. It's just, I don't know. I just have all these weird ideas in my head of how things should look, and I'm not going to explain them to anybody. So right here, double check it. And the leads. Yeah, these little, I was having the damnedest time finding these chiclet type caps, and then they're hidden, they were mislabeled on Tata. No wonder I couldn't find them. It's also just in general, it's getting harder to find axial components, but I mean, these are very obviously made exactly for this purpose. Like, that's about the only place where the 0.1 chiclet capacitor is commonplace today. Now we've got our board populated. We will do the transistors separately because everything here is on the same level, basically. Now, what I do is look for my blue tack, because I think it fell on the floor. I had a big gob of it somewhere, and now it's not here. You bugger. All right, well, this should be enough. I knew I had a bigger gob of it, but this is just going to have to do. So what I do is I hold everything in my hand like this, and then I just bend everything just enough to keep it from falling. Pinch them off. That'll hold them up in there. Now, rather than do it on the board, because I think I got more room to work, I do this. I put this on the resistors here because they're a little lower. And then just boom. Pop this down till I feel the caps rest against the table on their own, and that holds everything nice and tightly in place. Next thing we're going to do is I use separate rosin on, or flux on everything, because it just does a cleaner job. Yeah, I want to keep contaminants out of the joints. I want them to be in as close to an oxygen-free environment as possible until that solder hardens and sealing everything in. And that's exactly what flux does. It preps the metal, removes oxidation from the metal, and it keeps contaminants out of the joint that will cause them to degrade over time. And these little syringes of this stuff, they last forever. Like this was like $8. I've been using it for like 3 months because you guys put that tiniest little dab. I mean, the annoying part is it's still like the plunger falls out because it's barely into it. And then that got her there. Boom. Now, if you're inexperienced at this, you can do just the resistors and just the caps and whatever. I do these all the time, so I bang them all out in one shot like this. But If this seems like a little too much, or you just are worried about getting everything just right, just do the lowest level, the resistors, then the capacitors, then the transistors. It's no big deal. There's no rules to this. You do it however you want. Have it your way. It's like Burger King. Except it's actually good. And now my favorite part of soldering is waiting for the soldering iron to heat back up, because I turned it on and forgot that the standby was on. What temperature do I use? I use about 390 Celsius. So probably like 730 or something Fahrenheit. Pretty hot. I go hot and fast is the way to roll with solder. You'll actually do more damage with a cold soldering iron than with a little too hot. Just keep it moving. Make sure the tip's cleaned. Boom, boom. Hit it with some solder. Wipe the excess off. Always tin your tip. Always tin your wires. Them's the rules of the road. I put the soldering iron on the pad. I count 1/1000, and then I touch the solder to it. Don't touch them at the same time. You want to give it just enough time that the heat transfers to it. You don't want the solder to melt to the gun. You want it to melt to the joint. Also, make sure you have plenty of ventilation, an exhaust fan, a window, whatever. Ideally, have one of those fume extractors, but at least do not just keep breathing this stuff in. I don't care if it says non-toxic. It's nasty stuff. Now see, and don't blow on your joints. That's how you get cold joints that don't last. A good flow should flow nice and evenly around it and completely and look like a little volcano with a flagpole sticking out of it. And it should be shiny. If it goes dull gray or like milky colored, like real quick, then it probably didn't get hot enough. You should reflow it and add a touch more solder to it. Otherwise, you may have a failure down the line. Here's where it gets tricky if you're not used to doing this stuff. You see that one there? I don't know if you can see it. It's a little cold. It looks like white instead of shiny. So I'll just hit it again. There it goes. Boom. And also be careful with that joint right there, that little double joint, because it's easy to put too much solder and then fill up the hole for the collector of Q2. And then you'll be in a little bit of trouble. You just have to fix it, but you don't want to have to fix anything that you did. If you're fixing something, it should be somebody else's mistake. Turn this around for easier access to these last three over here. See that one a little cold? There we go. All right, looking pretty good. I'm gonna pull this guy up, take this tack off it, And see, we've got nice, neat, everything's down to the board, pretty level. You can still make little adjustments if you have to. Just do them gently. If you have to, you know, resolder them. There's nothing wrong with, you know, taking your time and doing things a couple times to get it right. You know, if you're doing this for yourself, or especially if you're doing it for somebody else, do it right. Take the time, do it well. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. Now, we'll cut all these leads off. Now, normally with cheap parts, I cut the leads right into the trash, but these thick leads are useful for stuff. I use them to make jumpers on breadboards and stuff. So, and they're long enough, so I have a little pile set aside where I keep the long enough ones like this. Because, yeah, sometimes you just need a little piece of lead to fix something. Like, you'd be amazed. Sometimes a lead is great. If you do have to get solder out of a hole, a lead can get you out of a jam. But if you're not saving the leads, just cut them right in the trash can. Put the thing right in the trash can and cut them right into the trash. Don't even bother. The only reason I'm doing that is because I use those thick leads. If it was like the thin regular metal film resistors, modern stuff, I would just throw them right in the trash. So next up, let's put this back in the helping hands. Are they that helpful? I don't know. All right, so let's look at Q1 has the blue on top. Q2 has the black on top. I put these adorable little pants on them because, I don't know, it looks nice. It shows you cared. Actually, I got in the habit of doing that because of some fuzz pedals, these legs have to cross over. Some transistors have a different pin out. Some PCBs have a different pin out. And when you want to cross these over, you definitely want to put some insulation on them. And all this is just pieces of stripped wire. You know, just the regular hookup wire. I just stripped the piece off and put it on there. So what you're going to do is preform your leads to reach the holes. The holes are spread out. And you're also going to want to double check your base collector emitter. These PCBs show you right there. It can't get any easier than that. CBE. So EBC. And then over here, you got, it's reversed. So just keep that in mind. Your collectors are flipped on this one. Q2 and Q1 face in opposite directions, essentially. All right. And this is Q1 here. Q1, you can tell Q1 because if you look at the back, you'll see that the emitter goes right to ground. And that's how you know it's Q1, whereas the collector of Q2 goes right to this resistor, the emitter goes to the fuzz pot, etc. It's just a different layout. So I'm going to stretch these out a little more because they're not quite there. And what I do is I grab them close to the transistor and do one bend. You don't just mangle these up. I spent years learning how to bend pipe as an electrician, and there's an art to it, and you can apply that to bending wire too. Then you come down here and you do another bend. You put a little offset in it, and it looks a lot nicer than just forcing it to where you want it to go. Now, I have arranged this so that green is the emitter, as I always do. Looking back there to remember to double check, and boom. I happen to know that the collector always goes closest to that 100K resistor on the end. So that's how I remember where these go. But I'll just show you that it never hurts to double check yourself, because as many times I think I know what I'm doing and I mess something up. Now, I'm going to hold this in place with this tacky stuff. And I'm just going to suck it up and get some more tacky stuff because I need it to do this job. And I know it's up here somewhere because I literally just did this yesterday. Come on. You gotta be kidding me. This has got to be the worst video ever. Screw it. I'll do one at a time. I usually do these two at a time, but we're going to do them one at a time. And you're also going to see one of my little mods here. Well, it's not my mod. It's a very common mod, but it's an excellent mod, and everybody should try it. and that's adding what's known as a Miller capacitor. These are not included in my kit. If you ask me for them, I will gladly add them in, but it's just not something that most people want to mess with. So get into my tiny capacitor box here. Get one out of these little 0.47 guys right here. Is that what that is? Yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. We're going to take a 47 picofarad this time. So 47 picofarad is 0.000. Yeah, 0.000 or 0.00047. That's a lot of O's. Oh. There's too many O's. And we're going to put this between the base and the collector. And this little capacitor, this is just a little ceramic capacitor. Nothing fancy. It costs about 1/10 of a penny. And what it will do is it will filter off, any high frequency noise, radio interference, which silicone transistors are much more apt to pick up. And what it also does is rolls off a little bit of high end, and it gives you just a more pleasant tone, in my opinion. And if you want to get closer to a germanium sound with silicons, then I suggest, trying these on one or both, upping the value. You can go from anywhere from, 50 picofarads to 100 nanofarads, I've seen. So anything in that range can give you interesting sounds. So it's something to play around with. But in general, I find the happy medium for me is putting it right on that Q1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make little hooks in the ends of the legs of this transistor. And this is one of the best ways to add a component to a PCB that doesn't have a spot for it, which is something you just have to get used to doing if you want to mod pedals, because obviously that's why it's called modifying, because they didn't come that way from the factory, right? Boom. So see that? I put two little hooks in the end of it, like that. And we're going to hook them over. And again, I'm going to face the 47 up, if I can find it. I can barely see it, but I'm going to put it up so that somebody can, in the future, can barely see it too. And hook it right on there. Hook it right on there. Now, I'm going to hit it with flux. Hit it with flux. Actually, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to push up on this. I'm going to bend this lead over. And what that will do is it'll add some mechanical strength to the joint. This one I'm not going to bend over because then it risks shorting out to that other trace. And we don't want to do that. We just don't want to do that. Now we're going to flux it up. So flux it up, don't gotta be sloppy, and don't worry if the goop jumps from one thing to the next. The second the solder hits it, it melts away and it breaks that connection. Yeah. So let's do this middle guy, and then I'm gonna recheck the transistor on the other side to make sure it's sitting straight. This, for joints like this, use a little more solder. Don't overdo it, but don't be stingy with it either. You want to make sure you get a good structural connection there. Yeah, just making sure that the transistor is still sitting straight and flush. Before I finish soldering all those connectors, sometimes you can tell from the leads. If you see the leads leaning, then the transistor is leaning if they were straight, They're not always straight, but if they were straight to begin with, then you know if the transistor's leaning in its place. Now here I'm going to press down on this while I do this. That went a little cold, yeah. Beauty. Now I will literally test I test my joints mechanically when I do something like this. Pull on it a little bit, make sure it doesn't just rip out, because you know, if you don't test it like that, you won't know if it would have just fallen off. You know, and you don't want it to fall off in somebody else's hands, then you look like a real jag-off, right? And see, that came out beautiful. Standing tall, proud, and most importantly, straight. And look how the legs are symmetrical. There's no strain on any of the wires because they've been properly bent to point to point. Fantastic. Next up, we go on to Q2 here. Q2, we are going to omit the Miller cap thing. It's just that, because here, Q2, if you put one of those caps on here, you'll do some heavy high-end roll-off. So if I am going to do that, if I'm trying to emulate the sound of germanium with silicon transistors, then what I do is I put like a 47, the smaller one I put here, I'll put that on Q2, and then I'll put a bigger one, like 100 picofarad, or sometimes even as big as 470 picofarad, you know. But that's what I'll do to get that warmer, you know, rolled off high-end sound of fuzz. Again, we're going to set these legs. Remember, I tested these for gain and sorted them and checked them before I did all this. So I already know these transistors work because I test all my transistors in a breadboard. It's just not worth it. You know, you could have 100 transistors work good, and then the ones you don't test will be the ones out of that lot that are no good. Now the collector here goes right to this right to this resistor here. So it's pretty easy to see that it just goes the opposite way of Q1. Boom. Now we're going to hold it back in place. Push it down, just get it gummed in place pretty good. Boom. Flip that guy over. Looks nice and straight. Bong, bong. Bam. Make sure the camera can actually see it this time. Can you? Yeah, I guess you can. All right. Let's double check the straightness here. It looks pretty good. Let's hit her with some flux. Boom. Now, if you want, you can flip the leads over. It's not necessary with these transistors. If I'm doing germaniums, I might do it. Or if they have longer leads or something like that. But for this, the solder will be fine. The straight legs are fine. It's a nice, stiff, thick PCB. They're good, solid, sturdy traces. So you don't got to worry about anything here. Ooh, she got a little sizzly. And that's why these have a magnifying glass on them. Sometimes you got to really look at that joint to make sure it's good. And I can see that the base joint did not take quite well. That's why I heard that little air pop. Something popped, like a air pocket popped in there. You want to make sure you make good contact all the way around the pad, all the way around the wire, okay? Now, let's look how we did, because this video is getting long. Boom. Take this guy off of here, get that goopity goop off of there, put that back in its dark hiding place, and boom. Now, you could leave it just like this. This would clear in a normal fuzz face, but I like finishing the job and bending them over. So what I do is I grab each leg with the tweezers here and do a little bend. Same thing over here. Do a little bend. Why I'm grabbing them with the tweezers is to keep from transferring the strain of bending it to the solder joint, okay? And after I bend these, we're going to recheck the solder joints, because sometimes this bending is enough to stress them out and crack them or whatever. Again, do a little bendy. Do a little bendy. Do a little bendy. Boom. And that's how a pro does it. Okay? Boom. You make it look nice and neat. You make it look like you care. Because believe me, you will hear the difference. When you put your love into the pedal, you will get love out of it. Thanks for watching. Maybe in a couple of weeks or so, when I got time, and if I come across another Fuzz Face housing on the cheap, I'll do that. I'll take a look at this. We'll take a look at the next step in the process. Sorry, I just got a notification that reminded me I have a meeting. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. PD Grizz out.